many times. You know, I'm almost 79 years old, and I don't even have a doctor now. And I remember when I did start the school, you know, nowadays you had to get all your shots and everything, and you had to take a paperwork to the school and show you've had all your shots and things. But when I started the school, that wasn't necessarily the way it was. The health department for the county you lived in, they sent nurses out to the school. They lined all the kids up, and they did this, they gave them the necessary shots, you know, like for measles and chicken pox and things of that nature.
Polio.
No, polio wasn't. You didn't. When I was little, you wasn't getting shots for polio. I was probably about 13 or 14 years old before they came out with a polio
vaccine.
That's
right, yeah.
And at that time, they did. The health department did come to the school, and everybody did have to, you know, take this. I think at that time, it may have been an oral medication.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but you know, people that I went to school with actually had polio. One of the kids in my class was a polio victim, and it was a serious problem back in the, you know, the 40s and 50s, early 50s. So they came, the health department came to the school, gave everybody polio shots. But I believe I was probably 13 or 14 years old. I know I wasn't in the first or second grade at that time. I was, because I remember when we got the polio vaccine, we got it in the auditorium. Everybody in the school had to line up and get. That was you know, nowadays they don't do that. You have to go to the doctor and you have to pay for it and all that. But we didn't pay for any of that. The county health department was responsible for that. Same thing with medication. I know when I talked about Dr. Hausmer coming to our house, we didn't have a drugstore or no place to go to a drugstore, and there was no such thing as over-the-counter medication. If you got some medication, it was something that was fabricated by your parents, you know, with castor oil or a little sugar or maybe even some kerosene. You mix it together and you make up some kind of cough syrup or black draught or whatever they use. Some of it was pretty awful stuff that your parents, and sometimes they would rub lard on your chest and you know, I just I don't know what all that medication was, but it was hand-me-down stuff that they had learned over the years that the way they treated people. And we didn't have a drugstore or any over-the-counter medication or anything like that, so it was up to your parents to try to figure out it. And if you got hurt, like, you know, I said before, when my sister got hurt when the dynamite cap went off, we weren't able to take her to a doctor or anything, and my mother treated her, and she closed the wounds with lard, and then wrapped a, you know, sheet around her to you know, and then put her to bed and kept her comfortable, you know, for several days to see if she was going to survive. And that was kind of the way it was. I know when I was small, I remember one time I cut my foot, and it cut it really bad. I still have the scars on my foot where I cut it, but you know, it probably need to be stitched up and all that, but there was no way you could get anywhere. It was during the war, and there was no way to go anywhere, no fuel, no car, no doctors. And my mom just tied it up real tight, and you know, put some kind of a medication that she come up with over the top of it to stop it from bleeding, and tied it up real tight. And then I hobbled around on, you know, one leg for a while until it healed up, and it finally did heal up. It took a while, but nowadays, I'm sure you'd get some kind of infection, or you'd have to go get stitched up and be on crutches or whatever. But we didn't have anything like that, and it was just by guess and by God. You had to figure out what was ailing you, and you had to figure out some way to treat it.
Remember when some of us kids got sick at Uncle Phil's and they treated us with Copper's water?
Yeah, well, we were down in Kentucky. And kids got sick. A lot of it may have been from traveling, and they had rash. And Phil was old country too. They didn't go to the doctors or anything, and he went over to the stripper dumps, and he got Copper's water from the stripper dumps. Now, ask me what Copper's water is. I have no idea. It was ugly looking, and it came out of those stripper dumps, and they were treated with that Copper's water, and they healed up. And we actually took a gallon of that Copper's water home with us, and we used it even when we were living in Illinois. We kept that gallon of Copper's water around there when people would get cuts or rashes, or we would use that Copper's water to kind of treat it. And I have no idea what it may have not been doing anything, but Phil believed in it.
The other cure was tobacco, I remember.
Yeah, it was snuff and tobacco.
Bee stings or whatever.
If you got stung by a wasp or a spider or a dog, get bit by a dog, or that was fairly common things. Those were everyday occurrences when you lived in the country. Kids got stung by wasps on a daily basis sometimes, because they'd be playing out there and there was wasp nests and things everywhere, and you'd get bee stings or wasp stings, and you go see your mama, and she'd just take a little tobacco juice or snuff juice, and she'd rub it on there and tell you everything's gonna be all right, and then you go play some more, and that's kind of how it was. And it wasn't uncommon to get dog bit too, because dogs would come around. A lot of different dogs, not necessarily the dogs you own, but other dogs would come around. If you get out there, they'd get to fighting with the other dogs, and then if you tried to interfere in the fight, sometimes you'd get bit, and that's kind of the way. And sometimes they would have some alcohol or maybe some white lightning or something like that to pour on it, to kind of sterilize it. And a lot of that stuff was used. I guess if it had been older, we'd just drink the white lightning, but we were kids, and they put that stuff on there, put some of that Copper's water on there. But I don't remember ever going to a drugstore. Even as my kids were small, there was no prescription drugs and things of that nature.
You used to give us peppermint sticks melted in whiskey.
Yeah, that was for coughs and stuff. And if you give them enough of it, they'd shut up. But that was their favorite. They kind of liked that. They'd be hacking and coughing just to get some more of it. But things have changed now. I mean, people go and get, flu shots, and they go to prescriptions. I mean, you can't walk by a doctor's office if he don't give you some kind of prescription. And, there's pill bottles in everybody's medicine cabinet. And, there'd be 10 pill bottles in there, and you can't identify what's in 9 of them because you didn't take all the medication or you didn't take any of the medication. And I know my brother, I used to fix his medication for him, and of course he was taking real harsh stuff. But he had medication. I'd be spending, I don't know, $700-800 a month just on his medication, because what he was being treated for. It's people don't usually have that kind of problem very often when you're kind of crazy. And even taking the medication, he was crazy. So, but
maybe dig up some of that old Thorazine. It'll help my diet.
Yeah. Look around over there. I'm sure you'll have some of that.
I don't even think about food.
It'll get you in a hurry anyhow, but your heart will beat so fast that you probably will lose weight. You'll be sweating, and your heart will be beating fast, and you'll be talking a lot. Because, sometimes he'd get on that medication, you couldn't get him to shut up, and he talked a lot anyhow about that. Sometimes, boy, he'd get jacked up on that medication. But it's just a different situation nowadays. We get a little, sore on our finger, or get a little cold, get the sniffles, a bellyache. We go to the doctor, and there's a lot of doctors nowadays everywhere, and the waiting room's always full. I can go down here right now to the doctor's office, and there'll be 10 people in that waiting room, and you'll be waiting there for at least 45 minutes. If you're lucky, 45 minutes. Sometimes as long as 2 hours.
It doesn't matter what time your appointment is either.
Just to get in to see the doctor, and he's got rooms lined up, and he's just going from one room to the next. He might spend 5 minutes with you. You go in a room and you wait in there, and the nurse comes in there and checks the temperature and does all that. The doctor come in there and you'll tell him what's wrong with you, and he'll say okay, and he'll say, well, he'll tell the nurse that get him a prescription, and then he'll be gone. Nurse come back with a piece of paper and hand it to you, and you go up front and you pay your bill, and you go to the drugstore. And that's kind of the way things are done nowadays. And I guess people live longer because of that, but I'm not sure that that's the best way to go. It's just a lot of people are always on medication just about all the time, especially some of these drugs that people take, for their nerves and that sort of thing. My Lord, some of that stuff is pretty harsh stuff. But that's kind of the way it was when we were kids. Growing up, not ever going to see a doctor. Your mom and your dad kind of did the best by you as they could, and you was kind of left to take care of things on your own. You didn't have money to go to the doctor, didn't have vehicles to get there, and like I say, the first 2 kids that we had, and they turned out okay. Were born at home, and I wouldn't necessarily think it was a bad thing, because when I asked the doctor about that, delivering the kids at home, and he told me, Dr. Frisbee told me, said, well, childbirth is the most natural thing we got going. And said, don't worry about not going to the hospital. He said, I've delivered hundreds of babies. And he said, don't worry about it. I'll come to the house and deliver the baby at the house, and it'll be just fine. And he was right. It was just fine, and everything worked out good. That's about all I got today.
Thank